The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, in this budget policy statement, National will say, "We are the party of business." The truth, as we can all see laid bare, is that to National, politics is a business. It's a business where the coinage of the day is their relationships with the rich and the powerful, the interests of the few, which they defend. And it's seen in the big things like Warner Brothers and Sky City and MediaWorks, and it's seen in what might initially have looked like littler things, like a minister's visit to China, where she happened to endorse the products of a company on which her husband is a director and which gave her party a tidy $56,000 donation. But then it gets more complicated because, as usual, it is not the initial pitfall that takes them out. It is the way they deal with it, Mr Speaker. The way they have dealt with this is to hide from the public, to obfuscate and delineate between what the public should know and what they've been prepared to say. And the Prime Minister has got to the point where, number one, he has told untruths to the country.
Order,
yes,
order. We've just had an hour and a half's debate. Remember, sir? We've just had an hour and a half's debate, an urgent debate on the matters that you're talking about. And I just asked the Leader of the Opposition to come back for this debate's on the Budget Policy Statement 2014. So this is what we're actually debating, and I'll ask the member to come back to that. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The numbers contained in the Budget Policy Statement are the outcome of economic and commercial processes which respond to the rules set by this government. And they have been set by this government in the interests of the most powerful members, or some of the most powerful members, of the business community. Not, sir, in the interests of all New Zealanders. And I won't go on for the whole of this speech about the mishaps that the Minister of Justice has faced or committed, and I won't go on about the fact that the Prime Minister's misled the country, or that he should have sacked her today, sir, but he could not summon the courage to do so, Mr Speaker. I will not go on about that, but I will conclude this part of my remarks by making clear this is not the first time that this National government has fallen for the interests of the powerful, and it won't be the last. This is the tip of an iceberg known as crony capitalism, and it's wrong. It is wrong in its effect, it is wrong for its victims, and their names are everywhere. They are 1 in 4 children in this country growing up in poverty. 1 in 4 of our children are growing up in poverty while this government protects the interests of the wealthiest few from the normal processes of business or the normal conventions of good governance. It's got to stop, and it will stop. And it's going to stop on September the 20th, 2014, when New Zealanders get a new beginning and a new start and a new government, Mr Speaker.
Yeah, right.
Mr Speaker, the government crows that it might finally, for the first time in 5 long years, get the books to the black. Well, we remain to be convinced, because for the last 3 months, the actual numbers have been nowhere near the projections. They're $600 million short so far this year. But even if they did get the books to the black, we ask the question, who wouldn't? They've got a 20-year high of dairy prices and a $30 billion insurance payout for Christchurch. Frankly, a trained monkey could balance this budget because it ought not be hard. But I've forgotten. Labor's run 9 surpluses in a row. Nationals run 4 deficits. They wouldn't know a surplus if they tripped over one, Mr Speaker. But the worst of the government's problems are actually not what it has done, and that takes some beating because there's those tax cuts for the rich, remember, and the GST for everybody else. The worst of this government's problems, embedded in this budget policy statement, are what they have not done. Business people say to me, even if you give them credit for taking the ship through some rough waters in the GFC, what business is saying is they have no plan for the future. They have no strategy. They have no vision. They do not know where they're going, so the rest of the country doesn't either. And where do they need to be going? They need a plan for better jobs and higher wages, Mr. Speaker. They need a plan to take New Zealand from thinking about volume to thinking about value. Of working with our primary sectors to increase investment, to increase innovation, to increase skills, to increase productivity, so that we can increase returns and increase wages. That is the strategic approach that the incoming Labour-led government will take. Mr. Speaker, what are the core elements of that approach? Firstly, let us recognise that we live in an economy that is starved of capital, that year upon year is building up net international debt to a point where it is now around the whole of New Zealand's GDP. 75%. It is a shocker, Mr. Speaker. And what it is made up of is 85% roughly private debt and only 15% government debt. So even if they managed to fluke their way to a government surplus, that wouldn't change the answer. The economy's still going backwards. Mr. Speaker, the only way to save that is with a savings system that increases our savings rate, with a superannuation system that is sustainable, and with a tax system that encourages innovation, not speculation. And that means capital gains tax is an essential platform for taking New Zealand forward, because it backs out a distortion that favours property investment at the expense of business expense. Well, maybe Aurovita won't let them. Or maybe it's people like Aurovita or the property speculators who are driving this government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have to get this economy moving on its stalled journey from volume to value. The secret, there is a member who's conveniently turning a blind eye to the fact that there were apparently 21 donors at an Antoine's restaurant dinner, and while this member says to any donors, open up and be frank with the public or you have your money back, John Key said no. I won't reveal a single donor. I won't give a single dollar back. Why would he? He's got his ministers scouring the world, doing favour for companies and taking money on the backhander. That is a shocker. That is a shocker. If that member cannot recognise a conflict of interest when it walks like one, talks like one and stinks like one, well, she just needs to watch the 6 o'clock news tonight, Mr. Speaker, because it'll be writ large for everybody in New Zealand to see. New Zealanders demand better standards from ministers than John Key does. And they demand better standards from a Prime Minister than he's delivering. So if he's so out of touch with New Zealanders, Mr. Speaker, that he thinks he can get away with a blind eye and a wet bus ticket to a Minister of Justice who is neither ministerial nor just, then he's got another thing coming. We want an economy, Mr. Speaker, which works, as my excellent finance spokesperson and deputy leader has said, for everyone, not just for the few. That has to be an economy with fairness and opportunity for all, for the kids growing up in poverty as well as the kids growing up at the top end of town. An opportunity and fairness for every New Zealander. It means a good school. It means a warm, dry roof over their homes. It means an affordable house. It means, sir, a health system people can count on. And it means opportunities for training and, above all, for good jobs. For good jobs, Mr. Speaker, that lead to better wages. Because New Zealanders, sir, are sick of this government's dead-end economy. A government that cares more about its own books than their books. A government that is feathering its own nest, those of its friends, its families and its party, not New Zealanders. And, Mr Speaker, this Labor-led government will be a government for change, a government for social justice and a government for development. Mr Speaker, it is time we had a long, hard look at the New Zealand economy if we want the next budget policy statement to be better than this one.
I call Maggie Berry.